What is going on YouTube? Gabmus here and welcome to the 40th episode of the Tech Pills live stream. So let's jump right to the first news of today. Google drops service integration in Chromium. So you probably already heard of this, and it's probably, if you're using Chromium, it's probably best if you know about this. So as of March 15th, 2021, Google will disable API access for Chromium and Chromium-based browsers. This means that you will no longer be able to either sync or use the geolocation API based on the Google APIs. You will not be able to use the Google Spelling API and the Contacts API or the Translate tool, and the safe browsing feature will be disabled. So this actually has been quite a disruptive moment for the community, particularly for the Linux community. The Chromium project isn't really all that used outside of the Linux world. That's because, well, Chromium being open source, distribution maintainers, of course, are going, well, they do package it for most distributions out there. And up to this point, I mean, before this announcement, Chromium was for all intents and purposes, the open source version of Chrome, and it's basically the same thing. And technologically and technically speaking, yeah, they are the same thing. But this change, well, it's kind of a big deal. The package maintainer for the Chromium package on Fedora, Spot, that's the username, has commented on this issue, stating that, quote, to put it bluntly, they do not want to access their Google API functionality without using proprietary software, Google Chrome. There is no good reason for Google to do this other than force people to use Chrome, end quote. Let's move to the chat real quick. Dominic Hayes, the FairNOS developer, hi there, says, every day we stray farther towards Google Chromium being official. Yeah, I mean, that's actually one of the things that I thought of. So if you don't know, Google Chromium is we can call it a fork, we can call it a patch set on top of Chromium. That what it does, it basically removes all of the Google integrations from Chromium. So even if you're using like the open source version of Chrome, that's Chromium, there are still some Google integrations, and Google and the browser does phone home. It sends some packages, reports some things, and the Google Chromium project was born from the from the necessity of some people. Some people just did want to use Chromium, but they didn't want anything to do with Google, and that's on Google Chromium. And fun fact, I do not have Chromium installed on my system. I do have on Google Chromium, and I installed that as a Flatpak. And the reason I'm using Firefox. Firefox is my main web browser, but the reason I do have on Google Chromium is because some websites, from time to time, this is getting less and less of a problem, but from time to time it still happens that Firefox struggles with some websites. And also, since I do some web development, it makes sense to test things out on all the major browsers, them being Firefox, Chromium, and of course Safari. And of course, for testing Safari, I use GNOME Web, also known as Epiphany, because it uses WebKit, and it's basically the same thing. So yeah, Google Chromium is a thing, and if you do need to use Chromium, this is a good option. Moving on, so according to the Fedora package maintainer, Google is doing this to force people to just use standard Google Chrome. And of course, this is not something you want to do if you care about your privacy. Of course, if you do care about your privacy, it doesn't make sense that you use the Google APIs in the first place. So this kind of creates a split in a way. Most distributions, if you don't know, they do not package Google Chrome like the official Google Chrome at all. I'm pretty sure that Google only distributes RPMs at this point of Google Chrome and a snap package. So there's no official way for you to get Google Chrome on other distributions that either don't support RPMs or snaps. And even RPMs, I'm pretty sure that that's for Fedora and Red Hat mostly. This said, the Fedora maintainer, the Fedora package maintainer for Chromium decided that they wanted to disable the API right now, as it doesn't really make sense to keep it running, knowing that it's not going to work very soon. So if you're using Fedora, you will probably soon get an update that will disable the Google API integration. And of course, you probably, if you do use these services, you probably need to find an alternative right now. The obvious alternative, in my opinion, is to use another browser. And in my opinion, the obvious alternative is either Firefox or the recently quite popular LibreWolf. LibreWolf is a Firefox fork focused on privacy and security without compromise. Let's jump right to the chat for a second. FairNOS dev Dominic says there is an unofficial Google Chrome Flatpak. Yes, there are many unofficial packages for Google Chrome, and in fact, I do think that it's also available in the AUR, but of course, it doesn't make much sense. Well, it does make sense. If you absolutely need to use the syncing feature in Chromium, and you cannot anymore. You can just download an unofficial package for Google Chrome. But that's kind of besides the point. I mean, I was talking about like official supported packages, because of course if you once you start installing unofficial stuff, you're on your own. If something doesn't work, unless the unofficial package is quite popular, you're practically on your own for figuring out why stuff isn't working, or I don't know. Again, I think this is beside the point. I do understand the need for Chrome or Chromium or whatever as a development tool, and as a development tool, you kind of need it. If you do web development, you do need to have Chromium or some sort of Chromium installed in your system. Or if you need it for work, there are some specific web apps built by some people that I don't know how capable they are of doing things that only specifically target Google Chrome, and they will not work on anything else. So in those cases, yes, you need to use a Chromium-based web browser, but you can either use on Google Chromium or keep using Chromium without caring for the syncing thing. Back to the chat, Dominic again says, pretty sure, however, that there's no development on Google Chrome as a snap, though, that we know of since. Well, that hint from a few years ago, they could become a thing soon. I was pretty sure that Chrome had an official Snap package. You know what? Let me check real quick. Chrome.com, I guess. Yep. Download Chrome. Oh, they do still have dabs. Okay. So yeah, they still distribute both a 64-bit dab file for Debian and Ubuntu, and a 64-bit RPM for Fedora and OpenSUSE. So I was wrong there. There's no official Snap package. There's the dab and there's the RPM, and that makes sense actually. I kind of remember that they removed the dab in favor of the Snap. Maybe that's just, I don't know. Probably it was something else at this point. Anyway, again, in my opinion, the best option here is to switch to something like Firefox. Again, Firefox is a great web browser. If you don't like Mozilla as a company, and that's perfectly understandable considering like their political stance as of late and the way that they're doing things and the integration with Google and Pocket and all that sort of stuff, it does make sense that you don't want to have to deal with Mozilla as a company. So if you don't want to use Firefox, you can use LibreWolf. I haven't tried this myself, but I've seen many videos of people I respect that have switched to LibreWolf. It seems like a very competent browser. It's again based on Firefox, and it's very close to upstream. So the thing with Firefox forks is that they typically don't stay too close to upstream. They're typically not so much up to date, but apparently this thing is different with LibreWolf. LibreWolf actually follows Firefox pretty close, and you won't use an outdated web browser if you use LibreWolf. Dominic says, RIP Firefox having PWA support though. May says, yep, without PWA, Firefox is doomed. So, if you don't know, PWA stands for Progressive Web App, and that's a fancy way of saying a website that actually acts like an application. YouTube can be considered a progressive web app, or I don't know, Mastodon, or what's that called? Element, the Matrix client. All of these can be considered progressive web apps. And the thing that makes a web app progressive is that it integrates native features like notification support, or well, I'm not actually sure what else that it does need. It gives you the option to add a shortcut to your home screen on a phone. That's part of the thing. TLDR, so Dominic says TLDR, they looked at their incompatible PWA work and said, forget this, and removed that whip code. Yeah, I know that PWAs aren't really like first-class citizens on Firefox. Still, I'm not sure if I care all that much, because give me an example of a PWA app that doesn't work as a normal website. Even on my phone, I use Firefox on my phone. I actually use Firefox nightly, but that's besides the point. And I use the YouTube Progressive Web app mostly to get the suggestions so that I can open it in NewPipe, because I don't have Google Apps on my phone, so I kind of need something if I want to get the suggestions from the algorithm. And yeah, that works for me. Dominic again says, no, it's still a thing on mobile as far as I know. Are they planning to remove it? I don't think they are. And besides, if you open the shortcut that Firefox creates, it just opens as a normal tab. And that's just something, I mean, I would expect it to work that way. The alternative way is probably to have something like a sandbox kind of isolated full screen tab of some sort, and you can use Firefox containers if you need isolation between progressive web apps, but I don't know if that's something you should care about. Yeah, definitely better PWA support, like having you just press a button on your browser and having Firefox just create a shortcut that acts for all intents and purposes like a standard application on your phone or on your PC for that matter, would be a great thing. But yeah, the Firefox still is missing that. I'm pretty sure that at some point it will be there in some shape, form, or another, because I think it's a very basic feature. Dominic again says, no, it's still a thing on mobiles first. Okay, I already read that. Sorry, I already read that. Jack Hallam says, thanks for letting us know about LibreWolf. Yeah, you're welcome. And I have to thank the Linux YouTubers that I subscribe to, mostly DistroTube. That's like I watched his video and then I subsequently saw other videos about LibreWolf. It's getting quite popular as of recently. Again, I still have to try it, and I don't know if I want to switch because I like to use Firefox nightly, and I don't know if LibreWolf has a branch, like a release branch that tracks Firefox nightly, but I doubt it, because I like to have like the latest stuff and test things out and newer features as far as like web technologies go. I like to have them early and test them out and see if it's worth it to implement something in one of my websites or something like that. Dominic says also, hi, in other news, Vivaldi turned 6 years old. Man, the time flies fast. Yeah, it seems like yesterday that the Vivaldi project started. Also, out of curiosity, does one of those LibreWolf videos you saw include Mental Outlaws? I saw the thumbnail, like I saw it in my recommendations, but I didn't watch that specific video. I just recently came to know about Mental Outlaw, and I've seen the video about Sudo being bloated and he suggesting to move to do as, and some other video that I don't remember off the top of my head. He seems to do pretty decent content. Why are you asking this in particular? Anyway, to wrap this story up, use Firefox. Don't bother with Chrome or Google Chrome or Chromium or whatever. It's just not worth it, in my opinion. Again, if you need something for Chromium compatibility, on Google Chromium is a good option. Your best bet is to install it via Flatpak, because that's probably the easiest way. And particularly if you are on Arch, there are packages in the AUR for on Google Chromium, but the binary package there is no binary package, so it's either you compile it from source, and that takes forever. I've never been able to compile a Chromium instance before, because it takes too long and it's just not worth it. And yeah, the Flatpak package is binary and it's up to date and it's compatible with all distros, so just go with the Flatpak. Dominic again says, sounds like a nightmare to keep their patches tracking nightly builds. Yeah, that's why I don't think that they are doing that. Made says sudo is muscle memory at this point. Exactly. Yeah. Well, you can always use aliases, but we're gonna talk about sudo, and it's actually the next story we need to talk about today. Um, the real problem with sudo, with like replacing sudo, is another one. We'll talk about that in a second. Dominic says just that I saw Mental Outlaws video on LibreWalls first. Oh yeah, okay, all right. Dominic says, man, YouTube, what did you do to the gendered shrug and cool emojis? What? Huh, that's, yeah. Yeah, that's a weird combination of emojis. I suppose that you didn't like do that on purpose. Anyway, let's move to the next news of today. Baron Samedit is the latest sudo vulnerability that has recently been disclosed. And first thing, just a TLDR, update your system right now. Check if the version of sudo you have installed is 1.9.5.p2. If it's that or newer, then you're safe. Otherwise, you're vulnerable. You are vulnerable to Baron Samedit. So this is a buffer overflow vulnerability in sudo that basically allows local unprivileged users to gain root access without knowing the root password or the administrator password. This is a pretty big vulnerability. Still, it's not all that terrible because a potential attacker still needs like local access or at least some sort of shell access to your machine to use this vulnerability. And of course, it's already been patched, so thankfully we don't have to worry too much about that. And yeah, I mean, stuff like this happens all the time. And but the thing in particular here is that sudo is like one of the most common packages on Linux. Yeah, you find sudo on every Linux distribution out there. Literally every one of them uses sudo for privilege escalation. So it makes sense that if you're an attacker, you're just targeting sudo and trying to find a vulnerability in that, because it's a very sensitive piece of software, and if that's vulnerable, then you're practically screwed. You as a user wanted to protect your data, of course. Again, this patch has been fixed, but some people are suggesting that this is just part of a bigger problem. The fact that sudo has this big vulnerability, and this isn't the first one, of course, and it just means something. It means that sudo is probably not the best tool for the job. That's because the sudo program, it really seems like a very small program that you just install in your system. Well, you do already have it installed in your system. You probably never think about it too much, but it's actually a very big piece of software. It's something around 40,000, 400,000 lines of code. I don't remember off the top of my head. Let me check real quick. I cannot find it. I need to spend some time looking for it. Anyway, it's a very big code base, and as for any software, the bigger the code base, the easier the possibility that you have bugs in that code. And particularly with something like sudo that's written in C. C is a very powerful, still pretty dangerous programming language, because it doesn't really give the developer any sort of security, because if you're using C, you have like raw access to the machine. You can just do basically whatever you want, and if you want to shoot yourself in the foot, C won't stop you from doing that. Compare that with something like a more recent language like Rust, that is comparable as far as performance goes to C, but gives you some security and security checks at compile time. That's a very different story. Modern languages are way safer than C, but C, it's still a very important language to use even to this day, because some parts of like low level stuff in the system, it's easier to implement in C than any other language. And besides, it's fast, and that's most of the reason, actually. So some people are suggesting that since sudo is so big and bloated, and the reason for it being so big and bloated is because it actually offers many options and configuration possibilities for various different use cases, like if you have a shared network computer server, or a shared workstation, and you have like multiple users accessing the this same shared machine, you probably want to use sudo to give those users specific permissions and limits on things that it can and cannot do. And sudo is part of what you need to do this. But if you think about it, for most users out there, and this goes for both desktop users and small server users, like if you have a home server or a VPS to host your website, you probably don't need all of the complexity that sudo offers you. An alternative to sudo that's much smaller and um, uh, consequently probably more secure is doas. Doas is well, it basically does the same thing as sudo. If you run doas and then a command, it's going to run as root if the user has the privileges, and provided that he knows, well, they know their password. Jack Hallam says, I like the way you explain things. A non-technical Linux person like myself can understand your presentation. Thank you. Yes, I didn't really expect a comment like this. I have a tendency to actually overcomplicate things when I explain stuff in general. That's what people usually tell me. So this is a new one for me, but thank you. I'm happy to hear that I'm being clear in my explanations. So again, you can use doas as an alternative for sudo, and probably that's going to be a little bit safer, considering that the code base is like 10 times smaller or something like that. Still, there is a problem with replacing sudo as your privilege escalation tool in your system. If you just like use sudo yourself and run it for doing updates or doing administrative stuff in your local machine, that's probably fine. You can use doas, you can use sudo, you can use pkexec is another privilege escalation tool that you probably already have installed in your system. But sudo is not only used actively by you. There are tools out there that actually use sudo implicitly. One example that I can think of is with AUR helpers. Usually what happens is you run them as an unprivileged user, and then when they need to actually install stuff, they automatically call the sudo command and ask you to insert your password. Other examples I can't really think of off the top of my head, but there are also some server-side programs that have installers, like script installers, or in general scripts that you run from the internet to install stuff that actually call sudo themselves. And in that case, well, unless you have like a symlink to doas called sudo, and unless even the options, like the command line options that doas supports, are different from the ones that sudo uses. So it gets really weird. If you know that there's a possibility of you running some scripts or some programs that need to invoke sudo by themselves, then you probably will have problems with doas, or at least that's what I am expecting. I actually haven't tried because I don't think that there's anything wrong with sudo. I know that it's a big code base, but I don't feel like straying too far from like standard Linux. But maybe if you like experimenting, go ahead and try it out. If you find anything that acts up weirdly, please let me know, because this topic really makes me curious. All right, let's move on to the next news of today. Ubuntu 20.04 is on the horizon. Something new and something, unfortunately, old. So it's always the same thing with Ubuntu. They seem to be doing one step forward and two step back. It's not quite all that simple, really, but let's talk about two things that are happening in Ubuntu 21.04. So 21.04 will ship with Wayland by default. Again, this is actually great news. I'm really happy for this. And quoting Sebastian Bacher, a developer for Ubuntu, we believe now is the right time to try again. It should give us enough time before the next LTS to get proper feedback and sort out issues. So actually Ubuntu already tried to make Wayland the default display server on the distribution. They already tried in Ubuntu 17.10, and let's just say it didn't go all that great because Wayland, I mean GNOME Wayland still wasn't perfect. It had problems and weird stuff going on, and of course Wayland is still a very new project and there are still problems around it. It's not perfect, but it's growing. It's still growing, and to this day, I can tell you that I'm using Wayland full time, even for doing this stream. I'm using Wayland, which is pretty great in my opinion, because Wayland solves, apart from like all the security stuff, because Xorg is old and insecure and all the stuff that we probably already know about. I actually like Wayland quite a lot because it solves issues with graphics. Like, for example, one terrible thing that Xorg has is tearing, like display tearing. If you know what I'm talking about, it's when you're drawing frames on your screen, like your graphics card is drawing frames on your screen, and like things look wobbly or there are like lines going on. It's not easy to explain what tearing is, but you probably have experienced it at some point in your life. And Xorg is very prone to tearing, even when using stuff like the tear-free option for the AMD driver, or the triple buffer viewport or frame buffer, whatever it's called, for the NVIDIA driver. There are options to make Xorg tear-free, but they don't always work. And even if they work, it's not like they're perfect solution. In Wayland, none of this happens. In Wayland, I have no tearing, and actually, since I switched to my AMD GPU, games run smoother on Wayland, and most of the games that I do run need Xorg, and so these games actually running inside Xwayland, which is it's basically an Xorg server inside of Wayland. So it's a Wayland client that has an Xorg server inside. It's kind of a weird thing. If you ever use Mac OS, you know that at least last time I used it, Mac OS has X11 built in, so you can use Xorg apps like GIMP or other. I don't know. Wine probably still uses X11, even if it's even still supported in Mac OS, and you can use X11 apps inside of the Mac OS display server. I think it's all one thing, the display server and the compositor and all that stuff. I think it's probably called Quartz. Basically the same thing. You have an X server running inside something else. It's nothing new. Even Windows has these kind of X server window things. And games run faster on Wayland. Well, not necessarily faster, but smoother. The frame rates are more consistent, and also if you have like variable refresh rate monitors or monitors with different refresh rates, they're not really all that well supported in Xorg, while in Wayland they do work seamlessly, and you don't have to do anything to make them work. So these are just some of the things that I really like about Wayland compared to Xorg, and these are all like user-facing things. It's not like I'm too concerned with the safety and security of Xorg or Wayland or whatever. I know that Wayland is more secure, but honestly, I don't really care too much, because it's kept up to date. Many distributions are using it. Many people are still using Xorg. So I don't think that I will see my system being broken by an Xorg vulnerability anytime soon. Let's move to the chat. Mazed says, I don't I don't expect experience, I guess, any tiering with triple buffered enabled NVIDIA. Yeah, for some time that works until it doesn't. I'm not sure what's going on there, but both with triple buffering and AMD Tier 3, there are two options to um, enable Tier 3 XORG. At some point it just stopped working, and this happened to a friend of mine. She has a GTX 7, well, she had a GTX 760, and she enabled the triple buffering on the NVIDIA driver, and then when she moved to the legacy driver, once the old graphics card was no longer supported, she again got tearing in her system. So it's weird. Xorg, I'm pretty sure that it's probably not built for this kind of stuff. Tearing was probably not a problem when Xorg was invented. Besides, again, it's very old software, so it makes sense that it wasn't a concern. FairNoise Dev says, too bad GNOME has decided to keep a bug unfixed by design in GNOME Wayland by refusing to support specification that allows application to have server-side decorations. I'm not sure what you're talking about here. I'm pretty sure that you can run server-side decorated, well, you cannot have server-side decoration in Wayland, because Wayland doesn't do much. Wayland is a protocol, so in theory, and well, actually in practice, applications have to decorate themselves, and most toolkits out there support client-side decorations. GTK does, Qt does. I'm pretty sure that Electron is built around GTK to some extent, but it should also support client-side decorations. So I'm not sure what you're talking about here. Probably applications that are built from scratch, like MPV and Alacrity, but they have implemented client-side decorations. But this is just the way that Wayland works. It's not like they can create a server-side decoration thing, because even if they can do it, it would kind of be a hack, making the compositor, in this case Matter, behave like a server, which is not, and which would probably cause some, reintroduce some of the issues and problems that Xorg had. Like for example, one big problem in Wayland is that you cannot really record your screen. You can use APIs like Pipewire in GNOME for recording a particular window or something, or even an entire screen. It's not, at this point, it's still not 100% working fine. For like Firefox screen sharing, it works fine, but for OBS capture, for instance, it doesn't really work all that well because it's slow and sluggish, and at some point it just stops working. So there's still some work to do there, but it's a consequence of how Wayland works. Every application can just look at their own stuff, and it makes sense that another application cannot look at, if, for instance, Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Teams should not be able to access the content of other applications because it's a proprietary software, and I don't trust it. I don't trust it to see the content of another window I have open in my computer. Same thing goes for anything else. And screen recorders are actually nothing more than grabbing what another window is drawing and recording that. And since Wayland is built to be secure and to eliminate this problem, of course it doesn't work. You need an extra API to do that, and one that requires user interaction, like the Pipewire API. Again, Dominic says, thus meaning a bunch of applications are likely gonna entirely lack title bars in only Matter using Wayland sessions. Again, this is not true. Applications that use X-Wayland will have a sort of server-side decoration. I'm pretty sure that Matter actually draws that. So there's that. And other applications that refuse to have a client-side decoration for some reason are just probably fighting like a religious war. It doesn't really make sense for an application to not have a client-side decoration. Server-side decoration is something that is going away. One way or the other, it's not happening. And I mean, if you look at, I don't know, Mac OS, Windows, they don't really have server-side decoration. But Windows has to some degree, but most applications draw their own decoration. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. Gumbo says, I love Wayland, so smooth and no screen tearing. I can't go back to X11. That's exactly how I feel. Okay, gitlab.gnome.org/gnome/maro/issues/2117. I will look at that and probably report back. Yeah, YouTube link detection is annoying, but unfortunately I have to keep that enabled because I can't have people just... There are fireworks for some reason here. What's going on? Oh well. I cannot allow to have people paste links in the chat because moderating that would be kind of difficult. I'm a one-man show, and unless I go bigger and hire someone, which I don't think will happen in the foreseeable future, I cannot disable these security or, well, spam filtering options. So, the Wayland thing. I'm happy that Ubuntu is moving back to Wayland. At least they're trying to. Just one thing to be absolutely safe here. Xorg will still be available in Ubuntu 21.04. You will still be able to use it, and it should be enabled by default for NVIDIA users. Moving on, something else going on with 21.04 is that it will not ship with GNOME 40 nor GTK4, and that really makes me sad. Ubuntu 21.04 will still keep on running 3.38, GNOME 3.38, and to some degree that makes me sad because it's like Ubuntu is going backwards. Like they moved to upstream GNOME and they're finally running up to date the latest version of GNOME, and then they're announcing something like this, not shipping GNOME 40, and that makes me really sad because I really want Ubuntu as like the most popular desktop and, well, server also, but that doesn't really make sense for servers. As the most popular desktop distribution out there, I really want Ubuntu to have latest versions of GNOME. But in this particular case, it really makes sense, unfortunately. I have to say it's unfortunate. 40, GNOME 40 is a biggish change, and Ubuntu has its own brand identity and user experience that is not the same one that GNOME has. Ubuntu relies on extensions to get their user experience and look and feel right, and so they need to make sure that everything in 40 works fine before shipping it. And since 40 is still in development, it's still not released, it's not like they can wait until it releases just to make sure that everything works. They have to take a decision, and the decision is to keep running 3.38 until they can properly test 40 and make sure that everything works and make the appropriate adjustments and changes that they need to do. I wonder how bad of an impact this will have on Ubuntu, with many GNOME developers quickly shifting towards GTK4. Unfortunately, this kind of behavior is like a slippery slope. So you start by freezing some packages to an older version. It doesn't really matter. Probably the maintainers are saying something like, it doesn't really matter. I will just update them. We'll just update them like in their next release. And then something big happens in the next release and you just say, oh, come on, I cannot really use the next version. I can just hold on to like the old version for a little bit longer. And what happens is that at the end of the day, you find yourself with a very old package years forward because you just need to stay back with the releases. I don't know. This is kind of one of the things that I don't really like about Ubuntu. They lag behind, and in some way, I understand why they do that, because they need to have some sort of stability, and they have a user experience that they need to care about, and unfortunately that's built on top of someone else's technology, and to make sure that it works they need to stay back when they need to. And in the case of GNOME 40, this is the case. um, I think that this problem could be solved by having something like a rolling version of Ubuntu. I know that rolling Rhino is a thing, but I'm talking about something that's actually properly rolling. Um, Probably the same way or a similar way that Fedora has Fedora Rawhide, that is a rolling beta or testing version of Fedora, and the same way that OpenSUSE has Tumbleweed, which is the rolling version, and the same way that Debian has testing and unstable, both of those channels, which are rolling and continuously kept up to date. Well, not no, testing is not rolling. Testing is like the next release, but unstable is rolling. So I mean, I think this would really help to make these changes less traumatic for the entire team. And if they had like an internal rolling version, again, do something like Rawhide and just have like the latest packages pushed as soon as possible, because that's not meant for normal users. And once you start once you get to a new version of the package, you start working on it, you start working on the integration, and in the meantime the stable release team can just keep on doing the things that work. But once like the unstable, the rolling team has the newer thing working properly, they can just move it back to the stable version, and something like that. I think that would really help make these kind of transitions easier and less traumatic. Dominic says, I mean, I get it for GNOME 40 time crunch. Yeah, didn't really have the time. Dominic, again, to be fair, we have Flatpak nowadays. That's something that really helps. Off topic, Jingo OS actually released. I actually chose not to include that today because I think it's pretty early to talk about it. So probably next episode I will talk about that. I will try to remember. Jack Helm says, I think Mint is trying to provide a rolling release via their LMD. That's Linux Mint Debian Edition. Not sure. I have mixed feelings about LMDE, and most of the reason is that it didn't really ever work for me. So not gonna comment on that. I'm not really following Linux Mint too closely these days. But I don't know. I wouldn't suggest anyone to run LMD. You either run Mint. I mean, Mint is fine, or you're better off running Ubuntu. Or if you really want something Debian based, just run Debian. So yeah, as Dominic suggested, Flatpak is a thing. So fortunately, even if GNOME 40 isn't in the Ubuntu repos, developers can still keep on developing for GTK4 and distribute their apps via Flatpak. And that's what I'm going to do really soon. Most of my applications have GTK4 branches open, and yeah, the GTK4 versions of my apps are mostly completely working. I still have some things to iron out, but yeah, I mean, GTK4 is coming. It's here, and apps are coming real soon. But if you need something that integrates into your system, like a terminal or Nautilus, you need GTK4. It's better to have like at least. I don't see why. Oh, I see why they didn't include GTK4, because they need a theme. They need the Yaru theme to be ported to GTK4, unless otherwise they will not have like their signature look and feel that Ubuntu has always had. So that's probably why they probably need to work on the theme. Anyway, hopefully this will be an isolated thing, and Ubuntu 21.10 will in fact include GNOME 40 or GNOME 41 at this point. Let's see where that goes. So moving on to the next news of today. This is really a quick public service announcement that I wanted to make. If you're using Arch, you're probably using an AUR helper, and if you're using an AUR helper, it's probably Yay. Yay is a great AUR helper. It's been working great for, well, since it started, but apparently one of the main developers has stopped contributing to Yay and started their own project. This new AUR helper is called Paru. It's very similar to Yay. It's written in Rust compared to Yay that's written in Go. And I switched to it. It's mostly the same. I really like new shiny things, so Paru is probably what I'm going to stick to for the foreseeable future. But if you're using Yay, it's not like it's abandoned. In fact, it's still going. It's still being maintained. You'll probably find if you want to keep using Yay, but if you want to switch, it's practically the same thing, and it's the new kid it's a new kid on the block, Paru. It's where most of the attention seems to be shifting to as far as AUR helpers go. So if you want to try Paru, go ahead and do it. It's in the AUR. You can either install the Paru bin package or the Paru or Paru Git packages that you need to build from source. Moving on to the next news of today. The Raspberry Pi Pico is the thing. So the Raspberry Foundation released a $4 Raspberry Pi. Yeah, that's the thing. To be fair, it's not like your standard Raspberry Pi. It's not a computer, like properly speaking. It's a microcontroller. So it's very similar to an Arduino, if you know what I'm talking about. The very interesting thing is that it's built on the RP2040 chip designed by Raspberry Pi in the UK. So it's their own silicon. Well, I don't think that they're producing the silicon, but the silicon is their own design, which is pretty great. It's a dual-core ARM Cortex M0 Plus CPU, with clock up to 133 megahertz, 264 kilobytes of RAM, 2 megabytes of onboard flash storage, and it's basically an Arduino on steroids. It supports C, C++, as well as MicroPython, which is really nice to see. But that's not all. Following the release of the Pico, many other companies announced compatible microcontroller boards, using the same chip designed by Raspberry Pi. These include Arduino, Adafruit, and SparkFun. They offer the same powerful microcontroller package in different form factors depending on the use case. And honestly, I'm just so stoked to see an ecosystem forming so quickly around a product that has practically just launched. Maze says, you bought Pico? I haven't yet. I don't know if I do want to, because I don't really have projects that would need a microcontroller right now, but maybe I will at some point just to play around with it. It's $4. I mean, it's not really all that big of an expense. What's really interesting here is that this is probably the first experiment towards the Raspberry Pi Foundation designing their own full-blown CPUs for the regular versions of the Raspberry Pi. Who knows? Maybe in the future. Could be very interesting. And as the last item for today, I just briefly want to announce that I finally have created a TechPills Matrix room. So if you've been using, if you know what Matrix is, it's basically a decentralized open source chat platform. And the particular thing about it is that you can bridge Matrix between different services. So and that's what I did. And now the TechPills community has been bridged through Matrix, and if you want to join either the Telegram group or the Matrix room or the Discord server, in any of those cases you will be able to speak to the same people, because all of these chats are bridged together thanks to Matrix. And it was really easy to do and really easy to set up. I did it this morning, and I just want to say, just join the TechPills community. It's never been a better moment to join it as of right now, because all of the different chats are now bridged together. You can it's one big community. That's something that I really enjoy. If you want to join the Matrix room. You just gonna you just want to join the room. Pound techpills at matrix.org. So that's the thing, and I'll see you in the chat. So with this, guys, this is gonna wrap it up for today's episode. We made quite a long episode today. Yeah, we had some things to talk about. Plus, you guys were awesome today in the chat. That's really actually something that I really enjoy, being able to interact with you, because of course every one of us brings different things to the table and to the conversation. It's not really it doesn't really matter if it's just me doing a monologue. I think that it's like the best thing here is to have like a conversation and to exchange opinions and all this kind of stuff. So guys, thank you for watching. This is gonna wrap it up for today's episode. Make sure to join the TechPills community, techpills.technology/community. Again, join the Matrix room, or join any other community, any other chat platform that you prefer, because it's all one thing now. And thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.